I think will be permitted, as well as members of the royal family will be there. And this is, you know, we talked earlier that the plan for when the Queen died was called Operation London Bridge. But they had to make all these sort of contingency plans because she could have been overseas, she could have been somewhere else. It turns out that she was in one of her most beloved homes in Scotland. And so that is what we're seeing now, which is the unfolding of another plan, the Unicorn Plan, Operation Unicorn, I believe. And it's giving the people of Scotland an opportunity to pay their respects, to honor her. And we've seen them. We saw them, you know, line up as the hearse with her casket rolled by. I'm very interested in finding out, and we will shortly, about the relationship that the people of Scotland had with her, because she is actually descendant of Scottish kings. She's not sort of the Saxon queen descendants. But we'll get into it, because you can tell I'm stumbling through it, because I'm not an expert in this area.
No, but to have her also pass away in Scotland, right? She had such a deep affection for the country and for the Scottish people. In fact, let's bring in CBS News royal contributor Amanda Foreman to talk more about this.
Yes, so the Queen is descended from King James of Scotland. And so that's a kind of very significant Scottish connection. You know, she has her own royal tartan, for example. And every year she's spent several months up in Balmoral, her favourite place. So the Scots have a huge affection for her. When her hearse went down the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, it was apparently the most packed it has ever been.
So what is the relationship like? What was the relationship like between the Scottish people and the Queen?
The relationship's always been incredibly warm. She didn't go to the Highland Games this year. It was a week before she died. And it was the first time she had missed the Highland Games. And that's when people realised that actually something was very serious.
What are the Highland Games for people who don't know?
Oh, so the Highland Games is when the clans and the Scottish compete playing traditional Highland sports. So, for example, have you ever seen men in kilts with hairy knees throwing a great big log up in the air? That's part of the Highland Games.
And so what are we seeing right now?
So right now, the honour guard is forming up, and the Queen's coffin is going to be moved to St Giles, where you will see two things. One is the ceremony of the keys, and then most importantly, the vigil of the princes. And this is when the Queen's children will stand in vigil. And these are incredibly ancient ceremonies. This is the extraordinary thing, that people sometimes say, what is going on here? Say, well, this ceremony has been going on for for 500 years. Operation Unicorn is distinct. It's different from what we see in England. So, for example, when King Charles gave his accession speech yesterday Saturday in Westminster, he promised to faithfully serve the Church of Scotland. So the Scottish have their own unique relationship with the royals and with now the King in particular.
Tell us about this plan where Charles is going to go to Scotland, Wales, and to Northern Ireland pretty quickly after the Queen passed, right? What is the intention with doing all of that?
Yeah, so again, that is actually part of the ancient royal progression that would happen after the death of a king or queen, and then the new king or queen would come to the throne. And so, for example, when he goes to Northern Ireland, there is actually no government there right now. The government has been devolved, but he will nevertheless lead a prayer, and the Irish politicians will gather there. He'll go to Scotland, he'll go to Wales, and each of these parts of the Royal United Kingdom have to come together. They all have their devolved parliaments, and he will meet with each of them.
He spoke today at Parliament. He gave his sort of official speech. What did you make of what he had to say?
It was incredibly moving. And what we were told is that as people sang God Save the King, there were tears in Westminster Hall. And it was absolutely packed for a start. He also spoke very movingly of the duty, his service, his honour, his mother once again. And one of the big differences is how he's been referring to his mother in such personal terms. And that is new, and that is a break from protocol. When the Queen became Queen, she never did anything like that.
Well, I feel like the humanizing of the Queen, quite frankly, was always made through statements by her family, right? It was the reference to Granny, or, the adorable little video with Paddington that she did not long before she died. You know, as we watch the hearse move here, I've been thinking over the past couple of days, we're always used to seeing Prince Philip, right, walk a beat or two behind the Queen. But now what we're going to see, please, Amanda, tell me if I'm wrong, is the Queen Consort will walk alongside the King, correct? She doesn't walk behind him.
That is correct. Yes, that's a big difference, and it's interesting that you pointed that out, that Prince Philip was never able to walk hand in hand with his wife, ever. And whereas this is completely different. You'll see the king much more physically affectionate with his wife.
Well, and I saw where they were speaking this morning, the king had his chair, but the Queen's chair was the same size as the king's. And we don't usually see that.
No.
You know, Philip had a tiny little seat, you know, a few beats behind her, and now they will walk side by side.
I'm curious, I guess this is a new-ish kind of role, but what will Camilla's role be like, do you think?
The Queen Consort's role has always traditionally been incredibly important. So for the last 150 years, it's been expected that she have a huge role in charities. There was a joke that actually happened, it was true, that Queen Mary was once asked, how do you feel about doing all these duties? And she said, we are never bored, and yes, we love opening hospitals.
So what David was talking about in terms of them sort of walking side by side, is this a new thing? I mean, are we seeing kind of an evolved monarchy, or is that the way it always was?
It's the way it always was. And in fact, we've already had a sign that protocol is going to be observed. So, for example, Prince Harry is not going to be wearing his army uniform, whereas Prince Andrew will. And that is because only serving members of the royal family can wear army uniform.
Really? But
Yes,
I thought Prince
wearing a
Andrew
suit.
was kind of on the sidelines there.
He is on the sidelines, and he will stay on the sidelines. But he is a member of the royal family.
Right.
He just no longer has royal duties. But as a serving member of the royal family, he will wear his army uniform. Prince Harry will not.
When we talk about the changes underway, and the King and the Queen sitting side by side, to see Harry and Meghan walking down the street holding hands the other day was also very notable to me. William and Kate were walking side by side, but they were not. And I don't know that I've ever seen them walk holding hands. Maybe they have.
No, yeah,
Forgive me.
they tend to be quite affectionate.
Are
I
they?
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it was something about Harry and Meghan. So I set that up only to say, the Queen was so buttoned up about all issues, right? Apparently never gave an interview and that kind of stuff.
Never gave an interview.
Right?
That's why what you said about their family humanizing her was so on point, because she herself really never spoke.
Well,
That's right. She never spoke. I mean, it's the most incredible thing, actually. When people talk about, they say, I talked to the Queen. It's one line.
Yeah. Well, Tina Brown had this great quote where she said something to the effect of, when she was with the Queen and she had come over and she was a Vanity Fair editor here, the Queen said something like, so are you living here now or over there? And she said, over there, ma'am. And the Queen said something like, oh, that's nice, and moved right on. I mean, short sentences. But do you think we'll see the King opine on things like climate change and give interviews on subjects like climate change in ways that the Queen would have never done?
Definitely not. The King has already said that he will not, and he's not allowed to. The extraordinary thing is that when he was the Prince of Wales, he would write letters to everybody in government, talking about climate change, conservation, animals, the things that he cared about. And he was ridiculed for it. He was lampooned. He was made to look like an idiot. And now, of course, he's prescient. Now he's a prophet. But before, this poor guy, you can't help but feel sorry for him, actually.
You say a prophet. Do people really see him as a prophet?
Well, at the time, when he was talking about climate change, people were thinking, why are you writing about this sort of...
25 years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah, 25 years ago.
He was ahead of the game on that. The other thing that I noticed about him over the last few days is it certainly seems as if he has been trying to remain emotionally composed, that he's been fighting back tears in many different times in Parliament, but also interacting with the people who had lined up outside of Buckingham Palace. You could tell he was really moved.
You're so right. I've been told that one of the things that we don't see is that actually the King is a very emotional person, highly emotional, and that there were worries that he was not going to fall apart, but crack to some extent, and he's managed to hold it together. But you can see, as you say, the tears in his eyes when he read his speech. This is a man who's who is so, he feels things very deeply.
Yeah, yeah. And it certainly seems as if he is appreciative of the early support that he seems to already have from the British public.
Deeply appreciative. And I think actually the British public is surprised by the amount of support that they're showing. That there was, I guess, when you're just standing in the wings the whole time, people wonder, what are you for?
Yeah.
And now he's centre stage, and people are surprised to see that he can hold centre stage.
Yeah.
And it was somewhat humbling, quite frankly, to hear people yell, "God save the Queen, God save the King," within an hour of the Queen's passing. Suddenly and how quickly it all changed to "God save the King." We are watching the solemn procession as Queen Elizabeth's coffin is taken to St. Giles Cathedral. This is happening in Edinburgh, Scotland. Amanda will remain with us. Anne-Marie and I will be right back. Quick commercial break. Stay with us.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
You are looking at live pictures. The king is accompanying his mother's casket as siblings of his walk with the casket. It's being taken from Holyroodhouse to St. Giles Cathedral. And look at the people. 2:49 in the afternoon there in Edinburgh, Scotland, as the hearse moves at a snail's pace. Nobody's really in a rush. The king will make stops in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It was the daughter of the Queen, actually, who was staying at the castle Balmoral. But now the king and his wife, the Queen Consort, have traveled to Edinburgh. siblings of his are there. And you can see the respect as people take photos. Let's listen in for just a moment. You were watching live pictures, the procession moving very slowly there in Edinburgh, Scotland. Earlier, people were yelling, "God save the King." But then we also heard people saying, "God bless the Queen."
Mm-hmm.
God bless the Queen. Have you seen crowds like this before, Amanda?
I've never seen crowds like this before, and certainly not in Edinburgh like this. It is literally packed. But what we have to remember is that the Queen was held in great affection in Scotland. When she was at Balmoral, for example, it was not unknown for her to pop into the local butchers. And,
oh, really?
Yes, and in fact, the local butcher has reminisced about how funny she was. Occasionally, she would let a quip about things. That there was another story of how when she would like to go walking on the moors, and she and her gilly, as they're known, is the person who accompanies her when she goes stalking, walking. They bumped into two American tourists.
I read that story. It's such a good story.
I know. You simply could not make it up. But they didn't recognize her.
Really?
Yes. In fact, one of them said, "Have you met the Queen?" And she said, "No, I haven't, but he has," pointing to her gilly. Wow. and the traveller said, "Well," asked him and said, "What's she like?" and he said, "Oh, well, you know, she's very strict," or something like that. You know.
He said the quote I read is, he said, "She's a bit cantankerous, but has a good sense of humor."
Yes.
Love it.
And so then they apparently asked for a picture to be taken, and the Queen remarked, "I hope somebody tells them who they are, just so they can realize that, you know, they got to meet the Queen."
I don't know how you live that down.
Kept walking on about that. Well, I actually thought to myself, how do we track down those people? Wouldn't that be a great
I know, where are they?
Where are they?
Yeah. You know, you kept on sort of saying that you hadn't seen anything like this before. And when you brought up, David, people yelling, "God save the king," and "God bless the queen," I think it sort of underlines this dual emotion that everyone's feeling, that this is a period of mourning, but simultaneously a period of celebration. You know what I mean?
I do. Well, you know, and Anne-Marie, this is going on. I mean, look, her funeral's not till next Monday, right? So you're going to have 7, 8, 9, almost 10 days of remembrance. But I think in a way, for a culture where we like things instantaneously to sort of move on, I think, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the British people need this time because she's so revered, she's so beloved, and it seems to me that nobody is quite ready to move on yet. They are all too happy to spend each day over the course of this week focusing and honoring her.
That is right. In fact, they're saying that London is going to be officially full, which it has never been, that the city will literally be full. What that means is that there'll be no beds available, no restaurants available, that they simply can't accept any more people. The streets will be full, the car parks will be full, the trains are full, because they are expecting over 1 million people to go to London to pay their respects.
It'll be a holiday, right? Businesses will be closed, I guess?
Well, that's only on the day of the funeral, but in between times, it's not a holiday. People are going anyway. They want to go to see pay their respects to her coffin. To give you some perspective, when the Queen Mother died, who was incredibly popular, age 101, they thought maybe 50,000 people might pass by, and in fact it was 200,000. And by literally, I think every few hours they're now upping the estimates. First they thought it was going to be 300,000 who would go and see the Queen. Then they said it was 600,000. Now they're expecting 1 million. And what they are warning people is do not come without provisions. Bring water, bring food.
Right.
And saying that the wait could be as long as 30 hours.
Wow. And bring some camping gear, I guess, as well. You might be out there for a while.
I have to tell you, I thought the Queen would live forever. For her mom to be 101, the Prince to be 99, I was just sure she'd make it to 100. And speaking of the Prince, he will be buried right alongside her. Once she is interred, his casket will be moved.
As they should be.
Yes, that's right. Not buried, though. It will be, as you say, it will be interred.
Interred, excuse me. Yes, that's the correct word. We continue to watch the solemn procession here in Edinburgh, Scotland, as we near the 3 o'clock hour there. We're going to continue to monitor this. We're going to take a quick break and be right back on the other side. Stay with us.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
when weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
The people of Great Britain say farewell to their queen as the world pays respect to a celebrated leader. From Queen Elizabeth's remarkable reign to the future of the monarchy, CBS News special coverage streaming now on the free CBS News app.
The headline from the Associated Press at this hour: the Queen, the children of Queen Elizabeth II are accompanying their mother's coffin on a procession to the Scottish capital. You can hear the horses' hooves as they walk there on the cobblestone streets. King Charles is actually in a military uniform. His siblings, the Princess Royal, Prince Andrew, and others are joining as they walk behind the hearse. Prince Edward is there too. They're all moving slowly as they head towards St. Giles Cathedral. You'll notice that the hearse is actually flanked by a bearer party of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. And according to the AP, there's a detachment of the King's bodyguard in Scotland. The coffin will head to the Cathedral of St. Giles. It'll be there until Tuesday so that members of the Scottish public can pay their respects.
And we still have Amanda Foreman with us now to talk a little bit more about what we're seeing. You talked about the fact that this is steeped in tradition. This is the sort of thing that we would have seen probably happen 100 years ago. Can you tell us exactly what we're seeing?
Yeah, so what happened was that the coffin arrived at the Palace of Holyrood earlier this morning. It was a 6-hour journey from Balmoral. So, and then it remained in the throne room overnight, obviously allowing staff to say farewell to the Queen. Just before the hearse left for St. Giles's Cathedral, there was the ceremony of the keys, which was very important. The King symbolically received the keys to the city of Edinburgh. Then the hearse began its long procession. It takes 25 minutes to proceed along the Royal Mile to St. Giles's Cathedral. And the King's bodyguard is actually known as the Royal Company of Archers. Yes, and you can see what they're carrying. Those spikes are pretty.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. No, they're actually sharp. And the King, the Princess Royal, the Duke of York, that's Prince Andrew, the Earl of Wessex, that's Prince Edward. Although we can't see it precisely from this particular angle, they are actually marching in step with the marchers, and that requires practice. You can't. It's difficult. You can't just stroll along.
Now, Amanda, the plans for this. I mean, I read somewhere that they were well in the works dating back to when the Queen actually ascended to the throne. Have they for decades been planning what would be her funeral?
They have. They've been planning it for the last 30 years. For example, the coffin is traditionally made of English oak, and it is incredibly difficult to find English oak as wood. You can't just chop down an oak tree. And for several decades now, American oak has been used. So the coffin had to be made a long time ago in order for it to be made of English oak.
Interesting.
And the fixtures and the fittings, everything is inscribed. Everything is designed, and it takes a long time. It has to be done with traditional skills. So that's another reason why the coffin had to be made several decades ago.
What happens with her staff now? These are people who would have worked with her for decades, probably. Do they become Prince or King Charles's staff, or what happens with that?
So the Queen's staff are given a month's notice. Now, they have the opportunity, though, that they can be transferred to other duties within the royal household, or they can retire. But Queen is dead, long live the King, and that extends to the royal household. There is now a new royal household, and it is not the Queen's royal household. But, for example, the Queen specifically asked that Angela Kelly, her dresser, who was also a great confidant of hers, be allowed to stay on in her Grace and Favour apartment. A Grace and Favour means that it's an apartment that's owned by the Crown, and the person who lives there lives at the favour and the grace of the sovereign.
I remember being a young boy the night the crash happened with Princess Diana. And what happened after that, you know, I remember, you know, from being a kid, how Camilla was sort of vilified and how she was seen in the press, and she was sort of, you know, not the most popular figure. But now we have, at the request, quite frankly, of Queen Elizabeth, Camilla, now the Queen Consort. I remember the Queen said in a statement, she said, "And I hope in the fullness of time that my son will be known and accepted as King Charles." And, you know, I'm paraphrasing here. But Camilla will be known as the Queen Consort. How is Camilla seen with the British public now?
That is one of the great revolutions of the 21st century. That 25 years ago, I think you could say that Camilla was probably the most unpopular woman on the planet, let alone Great Britain. The Queen would not have her around. The Queen literally said, "I will not have that woman."
Wow.
Around. And she was banned from all royal gatherings. She was furious.
Wow.
The Queen felt that Camilla had a role and was very angry about it, had a role in the separation between King Charles and Princess Diana. And so Camilla did not appear until a celebration for Prince Charles's birthday. And Prince Charles had a birthday party, and he insisted at this point that Camilla was allowed to attend. In fact, he wouldn't have it any other way. And that was her first public outing. And very, very slowly, she began to take on tiny little roles, you know. And she has two great loves. One is literacy and books. She's a huge reader. And so she's a patron of the Booker Prize, for example, one of the biggest literary prizes in the world. She also cares passionately about women's causes, in particular domestic violence and charities that look after the victims of rape. And so she took up, as you could say, some unpopular causes or ones which aren't glamorous, you know, don't easily attract public sympathy. And so that's the kind of person she is. And that is why she's won over the public.
And I think she almost had a significant enough role in rehabilitating Charles's public image.
That's
because
fair.
she was funny, because she is funny and bright and charming, and she knew her role, not to overshadow, and she made him seem warmer and bright and funny and charming as well.
Yes, that's exactly right. People have commented on that she's one of those who speaks truth to power, as it were. In the same way that the Duke of Edinburgh performed the same function, that he would say to her, sometimes be quite rude to the Queen, apparently.
Really?
And he was the only one who could do that. Funnily enough, that is historically what the spouse of the sovereign is meant to do. Queen Victoria, who was the second longest reigning monarch now after Queen Elizabeth, when her husband died, Prince Albert, she cried out and said, "There is no one to call me Victoria now." Because every other person in the world had to call her Your Majesty.
I just think it is extraordinary for Camilla to be literally the most unpopular person in the world, as you termed it. And now, at the request of the late Queen, the Queen Consort, I mean, that is extraordinary.
But, you know, I wonder, too, if there's been, as with that evolution, comes sort of a humanizing of the royal family to a certain degree, right? What had started out as the story of this broken marriage and this interloper, I think people have started to still revere Princess Diana, but understand that Prince, now King Charles, had another love. And sometimes it happens that way. And, you know, this arrangement wasn't the best for anyone involved. And I think that people have kind of learned to accept that.
But in a way, Anne-Marie, I also think it humanizes Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Because she was said to be so rigid, right? And so for a woman who was seen publicly as maybe being rigid, to then come and embrace... I remember when the Queen had a birthday party recently, maybe it was the last 2 years, and she was handed a big sword to cut the cake. The only person with her in those photos was Camilla. And the two of them so genuinely seemed to be happy to be with each other. And I thought, wow, who could have seen this coming? You know?
That is so true. It's very interesting that in 2018, Buckingham Palace had its summer opening, and every summer opening, the public is allowed in, they can see the 12 staterooms, and there's always an exhibition. And 2018, there was an exhibition of the Prince Charles's taste in collecting. And the extraordinary thing is that they put everything up together, and it was sort of like little bits from his house. You could literally see the paintings that he likes and his furniture, and they kind of did a kind of mock-up like you'd see in a museum. And the Queen Consort went around with her sister, who's also a noted interior designer, and they said, oh, no, that doesn't look so good. And just before it opened, they kind of moved things around. And that kind of spontaneity is what makes people really love her.
Yeah.
Has she won over Harry and William? And to what degree, if so?
I think that step-parents always have a hard time.
Yeah.
And we know that there is some frostiness between Prince Harry and the Queen Consort, between Harry and Camilla. And, you know, every family has its difficulties. The sad thing for the royal family is that they're not allowed to have difficulties. They aren't allowed to be angry with each other, and they're not allowed to carry on their arguments, especially not in public.
Often behind closed doors.
Yeah. I think we're going to pause a little bit here as it looks like the casket is right in front of the Giles Cathedral. Let's dip in.
There you see the casket of Queen Elizabeth set on the podium inside St. Giles Cathedral. It was brought into the church by young men, their arms linked, up the stairs with the royal family, following first the King and the Queen Consort, followed by the Princess Royal, Prince Andrew, Edward, and his wife. Amanda Foreman still with us now. Your thoughts?
So what's so moving now is that everything that we are seeing has been planned with meticulous care and uses rituals that go back several hundred years. And for the people who are in the cathedral, they will recognize, for example, that the next time that they all stand and sing, they're going to sing Psalm 100. And many of them will know those words off by heart. And it was also one of the Queen's favorite hymns. She had a hand in personally choosing the music, as did the Duke of Edinburgh for his funeral. And this is when we get a window into what the Queen's personal taste was, which until now we never knew, except that we knew that she did love "The Lord is my shepherd." That was actually her most favorite psalm of all.
And so how will things unfold here over the next hour or so?
So there's going to be a combination of singing with the congregation, many, many prayers. The minister, after Psalm 100, will begin, and he will lead off with sentences from the Bible. And you will see you will listen and you will hear and see some of the most loved aspects of the Church of England. Favorite hymns, favorite prayers.
And what do we see right there? We were talking about that crown earlier.
Yes, so what is going to be laid on her coffin is the the crown of Scotland. There is no crown of Wales, for example, and there's no crown of Northern Ireland. But this is the crown of Scotland, which references the fact that after Elizabeth I died, it was her nephew, James II of Scotland, who became James I of England and Scotland, James I of England. And so the two crowns were united, and that is what Queen Elizabeth II inherited.
Scotland today and London tomorrow.
Yeah, and I thought what you were going to say was Scotland today and Scotland, I mean, years in the past and years in the future. I think that what's really moving about this is that there is a line through history that we can follow here, like a continuity, that what happened here is what happened the last time well, maybe not exactly the last time, but, a monarch passed away. And I think there's something, I don't know, reassuring about that.
There really is. And in fact, even though the Scottish, not quite half, around 44% have voted in the past in referendums for an independent Scotland, what the Scots have never voted for, wanted, is to abolish the monarchy.
Well, the words continuity and consistency come to mind, and I tell you what, Queen Elizabeth was just that. Right? Consistent, did the same thing the same way, and I think would have it just this way. Last question. Did the Queen have to sign off on every bit of her funeral? Did she have to approve it?
She did.
She did.
She did. And which is why it's so fascinating now when we know the order of service to see what it was that she chose. Because these will have been hymns that were, and psalms that were particularly meaningful to her. So Psalm 116 was another one that she particularly loved. She was a woman of profound faith, as we know, and so these words, they meant something to her, and that is why, in fact, Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I'll not want. He makes me lie down to lie in pastures green," is included in this service.
Amanda Foreman is a CBS News Royal contributor. She will remain with us. Thank you for that. And we have some other news to get to for the moment.
Indeed. Former President Trump's legal team have submitted their response to the Justice Department's attempt to halt a federal judge's order stopping them from reviewing documents taken from his Mar-a-Lago residence. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane is joining us again to talk a little bit more about this, to break down the legal issues. We also have CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson. So I just quickly saw that it was like a 21-page document, I think. Scott, just what's in the Trump team's response.
And this is the argument we expected. It was formally made in federal court